This is my first video update coming to you from Athens, Greece on this Saturday morning. And let's talk about some news, and let's start things off with what is happening in Ukraine on the ground with the special military operation. And I received reports yesterday that the Russian armed forces are starting to hit Ukraine's gas infrastructure for the first time in this conflict. Now, I don't have many details as to what exactly the Russians are hitting, if they are hitting the gas infrastructure. All I've got at this moment are reports saying that Russian strikes have hit gas industry facilities in several regions at once. So I'm not sure exactly what the Russians are destroying in Ukraine with regards to the gas facilities, but this is the first time, if these reports are true, this is the first time that the Russian armed forces have decided to go after the gas infrastructure of Ukraine. Now, a couple of weeks ago, kamikaze drones, they hit at the gas industry administrative buildings in Ukraine, but now it looks like they're going after the actual infrastructure of those gas facilities. I'm not even sure if gas is moving through the Ukraine gas infrastructure. That's Russian gas that transits via Ukraine into the European Union. We also have the pipelines which transit oil. I believe the Druzhba pipeline, which transits oil via Ukraine to Hungary and then eventually to Serbia. And that pipeline was actually shut off by Ukraine just a couple of days ago, and then it was turned back on after Hungary noted that Ukraine was shutting off oil delivery to Hungary via the Druzhba. So reports are still a bit hazy, a bit foggy as to what exactly, if anything, Russia is hitting at with regards to the gas infrastructure. And once again, I don't even know if this gas infrastructure is still being used to transit gas via Ukraine to the European Union. If this is true, and Russia is at the beginning of dismantling Ukraine's gas infrastructure, well then, that is a huge deal, because you have Russia already picking apart Ukraine's electric grid and now going after the gas infrastructure. That is going to make things very difficult for the people of Ukraine, for the economy of Ukraine. And if gas is being transited through that pipeline, then it's going to make things very difficult for the European Union as well. So if I get more information on this story, or if you know in the comments down below, then let me know. If I get more information, then I will pass it on to everybody. But that is all I got at this moment. So the other thing that is happening in Ukraine is Zaporozhye. A lot of activity taking place in Zaporozhye. We are getting reports that the Ukraine military is building up forces of around 25,000 to 40,000 troops in the region of Zaporozhye, and the eventual goal is to advance towards Zaporozhye and eventually down towards Melitopol. That is the alleged game plan for the Ukraine military. And the other thing that happened yesterday is that Russia took out the Zaporozhye plant of Motor Sich. Now, this is a plant which specialized in the repair of aircraft engines. And the Russians decided that it was time to take out this facility. A historic facility, actually, which was around from, if I'm not mistaken, from Soviet times, and was one of Ukraine's key facilities in the defense sector. So Russian missiles, it looks like they decided to take out this industrial complex of Motor Sich. Now, Motor Sich, interestingly enough, it used to be part owned by the Chinese. That is until a couple of weeks ago. Zelensky ordered the nationalization of the Motor Sich factory and essentially booted out the Chinese from their investment. So, coincidence that from the moment that the Chinese were booted out of their investment in Motor Sich and the facility, the plant, was nationalized, that the Russians decide that it's time to destroy this plant? Obviously not a coincidence. The Chinese are gone. Their investment is gone. The Chinese, by the way, were furious when Zelensky announced the nationalization of Motor Sich. And I'm sure as the Chinese left, they told the Russians, green light, you guys can now take apart the Zaporozhye plant of Motor Sich. So that is some big news coming out of Zaporozhye. The Motor Sich plant, by the way, produced AI-450 aircraft engines and components for drones as well. And these components were installed in Turkish Bayraktar and Akinci UAVs. The plant also assembled engines for military aircraft and helicopters, as well as repaired military equipment of the armed forces of Ukraine. So obviously this is an important target for the Russian military. So that is the news from Ukraine on the ground. And now let's talk about Russian missiles. Since we're talking about the Russian missiles taking out the Zaporozhye Motor Sich plant, let's talk about Russian missiles and a New York Times story, which is asking the question, where did Russia get all their missiles? Because we thought Russia was running out of missiles. Where have they gotten all of these missiles to have launched such massive attacks over the past week? And the title from the New York Times of this post reads, how was Russia able to launch its biggest aerial attack on Ukraine? Western and Ukrainian officials have said Moscow's stockpile of missiles was dwindling, but the assaults this week raise questions about that. So the New York Times, they offered 4 possible explanations as to where Russia found these missiles to suddenly launch such a huge attack against Ukraine. Actually, the biggest attack, the largest attack of this conflict to date. And this is after we've had months and months of reports where the collective West mainstream media and the Ukraine Ministry of Defense have been telling us that the Pentagon as well, the UK Ministry of Defense, they have been telling us that Russia is out of missiles. We've been hearing this now for the past 4 or 5 months, that Russia is running out of missiles, and this strike on Ukraine territory is the last strike. And then another strike happens, and then the collective West media and the various collective West Ministry of Defense offices tell us that this is the last strike, and then another strike happens. So the New York Times is finally asking the question, what the hell is going on? Just last month, actually, Ukraine claimed that Russia had used up to 70% of its pre-war missile reserves. That was just last month. And on October 10th, the British Defense Ministry said that the strike against Ukraine's infrastructure was, and I quote, likely to constrain their ability to strike the volume of targets they desire in the future. That's what we were hearing just last month. The strikes that Russia launched on Monday and Tuesday in Ukraine, according to the New York Times, was described as the biggest aerial attack of the conflict so far, featuring 96 missiles. So the four possibilities, the 4 options floated by the New York Times as to where Russia is finding all of these missiles begins with number 1. This is according to the New York Times. It's not me. This is the New York Times. I'm going to give you my theory as to where Russia is finding all of these missiles. That'll be option number 5. But let me read you the 4 possibilities from the New York Times. Possibility number 1, Russia is turning to Iran and North Korea for weapons, U.S. officials say. One explanation, coming from the Pentagon, which had claimed that Russia was running out of missiles as early as May, according to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, was that Russia was reaching out to Iran and North Korea to replenish its ammunition stocks, though Moscow, Tehran, Pyongyang have all denied this claim. Meanwhile, the U.S., just last week, they were trying to hit up South Korea for artillery ammunition. They actually went to South Korea to buy artillery ammunition, but that's something I'll discuss after I talk about this New York Times article. Possibility number 2 is that Russia may be building more missiles. According to the British intelligence firm Jane's, it believes that Russia is actually building more missiles, possibly using stockpiled microchips and other technology embargoed by the U.S. and its allies for years. Russia probably began producing high numbers of Iskanders, Calibers, and cruise missiles before February, and they are likely being produced as we speak, with the Russian Defense Ministry working round the clock, according to this think tank. Possibility number 3. Russia is using air defense missiles to launch attacks. This is according to Ukraine. Another possibility relies on Ukrainian claims from Thursday that Russia has used S-300 defense missiles to strike ground targets. The unverified claims follow attempts by Kiev to blame Moscow for the S-300 that struck the Polish village of Przewodów on Tuesday and killed 2 civilians. Got that? The Russians have run out of missiles, according to Ukraine, and they're actually now using S-300 air defense missiles as missiles to hit targets in Ukraine. So they're actually now going through their stockpiles of S-300 missiles. And of course, using Zelensky logic, this would explain why an S-300 missile landed in Poland, right? Using Zelensky logic, because he still can't bring himself to admit that this was a Ukrainian S-300 air defense missile that landed in Poland. So that is coming from the Ukraine side of things. That is possibility number 3. Possibility number 4. Russia may have been holding some weapons in reserve for a war against NATO. Mark Kansian of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a think tank in Washington, D.C., noted that few in the West know how many missiles Russia has in its stockpiles, and that Moscow might be holding some weapons back in case of an overt war with NATO. So those are the 4 possibilities. What do you think in the comments down below? Where is Russia finding all of these missiles? Where are they getting all of these missiles from, especially after the fact that the collective West mainstream media have been telling us for months now that Russia is running out of missiles, or they are completely out of missiles. So where are they getting all of these missiles all of a sudden? Here is my viewpoint on this. This is what I think is going on. I think that Russia has been building missiles, has been making missiles since God knows when, since God knows how long. But I think Russia has been cranking up its missile production since the 2014 Maidan coup, and since Crimea and the first sanctions against Russia were placed in relation to the Maidan coup and the accession of Crimea into the Russian Federation. I think it was at that moment in time where Russia, which already had the industrial manufacturing, the capability to build all of these missiles, but it was at that point in time that I believe Russian President Vladimir Putin told the Russian military-industrial complex, when he told them that it is now time to crank up missile production, because eventually, one of these days, somewhere in the future, we're going to have to fight NATO. I think that was the big moment. That was the inflection point where everything changed for Russia, when they finally realized that somewhere down the line, we're going to have a smash with NATO. most likely in Ukraine, but who knows where and how. But we've got to start cranking up our production of Kalibr and Iskander and build hypersonic missiles and just get ahead of the game. That's what happened. So who knows how many missiles Russia has? I agree with possibility number 4 from that think tank, where they state no one knows how many missiles Russia has. That is true, but I would be willing to bet that Russia has a boatload of missiles. I mean, an absolute boatload of missiles, and they have enough missiles to accomplish whatever goals they have set out in Ukraine, and they have enough missiles, including hypersonic missiles, to take on NATO, should, God help us, God forbid, but should that actually happen. Remember, Russia has only launched, I believe, throughout this whole conflict, Russia has only launched one hypersonic missile, and that was way, way back in the beginning of the SMO, and that was at the Yaroviv military training, mercenary military training facility close to the border with Poland. That was way back in like February, March. That's the only, from what I know, that is the only hypersonic missile that Russia has launched. I could be mistaken, but either way, Russia has been conserving their stockpiles of hypersonic missiles, so we don't know how many hypersonic missiles they have. And I bet you they have just a ton of Iskander and Kalibr missiles. They have enough to get the job done in Ukraine, and they absolutely have enough in their stockpiles to face any challenges from NATO. That's my opinion and my hunch. But you know, I'll float out another option. So that was possibility number 5. That was what I think is going on, and that is the most logical and rational possibility. But here's a possibility. Possibility number 6 as to where Russia is getting all of these missiles. Perhaps Ursula von der Crazy was right when she said a couple of months ago that Russia is using washing machine microchips to, well, she was right about the microchips, but she said they were using the microchips for fighter jets and stuff like that. So von der Crazy was half right. But, you know, von der Crazy is very, very clever. I mean, they don't call her the Pirate of Brussels for nothing. So she was half right. She was on to the Russians when she said that Russians are using microchips, but washing machine microchips, but they're not using washing machine microchips for fighter jets. What if the Russians have somehow figured out a way to use washing machine microchips to not only build Iskander and Kalibr missiles, but to speed up the production of Iskander and Kalibr missiles? Maybe the Russians have figured out a new process, a new technology, where they take washing machine microchips, combine it with I don't know, maybe like flux capacitor technology. Flux capacitor is something that only the Russians and Doc Brown and Marty McFly have mastered. And you know, everyone knows what I mean when I say Doc Brown and Marty McFly. They've mastered the flux capacitor, and they've implemented it in a DeLorean, and they've used it for other things like time machine travel and stuff like that. But maybe the Russians, they've mastered washing machine microchips and flux capacitor technology to speed up the production of Iskander and Kalibr missiles. Maybe von der Crazy was onto something there. So yeah, the flux capacitor technology, that's what the collective West has to get cranking on. So they have to get in touch with Doc Brown or Marty McFly. Those guys hold the key to the flux capacitor technology, and if they can then figure out a way to use washing machine microchips, then you know they'll be able to crank up their production of their missiles as well. But you know, Ursula, she was right. She was right about the washing machine microchips. She wasn't right about Their economy is in tatters, I tell you, in tatters. But she was half right. So, so yeah, that's those are the 6 possibilities. And of course, number 6 is I'm playing around. But I wonder if people know what movie I'm referencing when I say Doc Brown and Marty McFly and the flux capacitor. I wonder if you know which movie I'm talking about. Let me know in the comments down below. So, as the New York Times, the collective West, as they're scratching their head and they're going, God, where are the Russians getting all these missiles? Where are they getting all these missiles? What is going on here? You guys at the Pentagon, you promised us that the Russians were running out of missiles. Zelensky promised us that the Russians are running out of missiles. Where are they getting these missiles? At the same time that the New York Times is asking these questions, CNN is running a story with the title, "The U.S. is running low on some weapons and ammunitions to transfer to Ukraine." According to 3 unnamed sources who spoke with CNN, they are saying that that the U.S., the American stockpile of weapons, is running low, and this is because of all of the weapons they've been sending to, ding, 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 you guessed it, Ukraine. And some of the weapons that are running low, well, let me just read you what CNN says, actually. Among the weapon systems where there's particular concern about U.S. stockpiles meeting Ukrainian demands are 155 mm artillery ammunition and Stinger anti-aircraft shoulder-fired missiles, according to the sources. Some sources also raise concerns about U.S. production of additional weapon systems, including HARMS anti-radiation missiles, GMLRS surface-to-surface missiles, and the portable Javelin anti-tank missiles. Although the U.S. has moved to ramp up production for those and other systems. According to CNN, for the first time in 2 decades, the U.S. is not directly involved in a conflict after withdrawing from Afghanistan and transitioning to an advisory role in Iraq. Without the need to produce weapons and ammunition for a war, the U.S. has not manufactured the quantities of material needed to sustain an enduring high-intensity conflict. Defense officials say the crunch is not affecting U.S. readiness, as the weapons sent to Ukraine don't come out of what the U.S. keeps for its own contingencies. But the seriousness of the problem is a source of debate within the Defense Department, officials say. While the U.S. will not be able to provide high-end munitions to Ukraine indefinitely, assessing whether the U.S. is running low on stockpiles is subjective, one senior defense official said, as it depends on how much risk the Pentagon is willing to take on. And according to this article, there is no need to worry because Lloyd Austin and General Mark Milley, they monitor the levels of U.S. stockpiles closely. So no need to worry. Milley and Austin, they are on the case. But the article also goes on to say that the manufacturing of additional weapons is proving to be very difficult for 2 reasons, according to CNN. One reason is that the U.S. industrial base is having difficulty keeping up with demand quickly enough, and that is because the Zelensky regime is hungry for more and more weapons. It's a never-ending appetite for more and more weapons, and the U.S. MIC, they just can't keep up with Zelensky's demands, especially since the EU is completely unable to fulfill Ukraine's weapons needs. So it's all falling on the shoulders of the U.S. Now, Ukraine continues to ask for more and more weapons. Why is that? Why is Ukraine's appetite so large, so big with regards to weapons? Well, that is because the Russians are destroying all the weapons that Ukraine is getting from the collective West. That is why. Ukraine keeps on asking for more and more weapons, and the U.S. can't fulfill the weapons needs of Ukraine fast enough because the Russians keep on destroying all the weapons that are being sent to Ukraine. The U.S. MIC can't keep up with the destruction of weapons at the hands of the Russian military. That is what's going on here. That is what CNN is admitting. That is what defense officials, that is what they are admitting. The Europeans, they're out of the game. They simply can't keep up, and now it's falling onto the U.S. MIC to try and keep up with the pace at which Russia is destroying all the weapons being sent to Ukraine. That is what CNN is admitting here. The other reason that that the U.S. MIC is having a hard time producing these weapons and keeping up with Ukraine's appetite for weapons is because of the supply chain issues around the world. That's why they're having a hard time building these weapons, because of just good old-fashioned supply chain issues. Supply chain issues brought about by what? Ding, ding, ding. The sanctions that the collective West placed on Russian commodities and Russian resources. So that is an interesting article from CNN. While the New York Times is trying to figure out where Russia is getting all of these missiles and drones and stuff like that, CNN at the same time is running an article saying that the U.S. is being demilitarized, but no need to worry, everybody in America, because Lloyd Austin and General Mark Milley, they're making sure, they're very careful to make sure that everything that is being sent to Ukraine is not being taken out of the U.S.'s main military and weapons stockpiles. Just like Biden is making sure that the U.S. strategic petroleum reserves are not being drained to zero, right? Right. All right. So with that being said, let me just mention, I'm not going to get into this story because I think it's a horrible story, but I'm just going to mention what the UN said with regards to the murder of Russian POWs. The videos that surfaced the other day, a horrific incident that Russia claims took place with regards to 10 POWs. Search the story on Telegram. There's horrific photo and video evidence of what happened, and the Russians, they have taken this to the United Nations, and this is how the UN responded to this claim from Russia. They have said, quote, "We have called on all parties to the conflict to thoroughly investigate all reports of human rights violations and to bring the perpetrators to justice." That's all the UN had to say with regards to this horrific story, which involved Russian prisoners of war. A horrific, horrific story. So that is what the UN said, which in UN speak is pretty much, the UN saying, well, because they're Russian POWs, we don't care. That's pretty much what the UN is saying here with this statement. No condemnation of Ukraine, no talk of war crimes, no talk of a UN investigation, nothing like that. So that is what the UN said. Here's a real quick clown world before I get into my main clown world. The European Parliament has prepared a resolution recognizing Russia as a terrorist state and intends to vote on it at a session in Strasbourg on November 23rd. Delphine Collard, press secretary of the European Parliament, said at a briefing. So at the same time that Russia alleges, with video and photographic evidence and who knows what else Russia submitted to the United Nations, when Russia is claiming that 10 POWs were brutally assassinated by the Ukraine military, at the very same time you have the European Union Parliament actually preparing a resolution to say that Russia is a terrorist state. Clown world. Clown world. So let's do a real clown world here, and that has to do with our favorite Ukrainian ambassador, who was once the ambassador to Germany and was later fired by Zelensky, but now he is going to be promoted, and that is Mr. Andrei Melnik. He was the guy that called Olaf Scholz sultry or sulky or sexy, I forget the word, liver sausage. He called him one of those words, sultry, sexy, silky liver sausage. This is the guy that was ambassador of Ukraine to Germany, and he was the ambassador who on a daily basis was making fun of Olaf Scholz, making fun of the German people, making fun of Germany in general, the German government. And he was doing this for the better part of the year of the military operation. For the 8 months of the military operation, he was constantly berating and belittling German society and the German government until Zelensky had to fire him because he gave an interview to, I believe, to a Dutch podcaster, if I'm not mistaken, either a Dutch or a French podcaster or a German podcaster. I forgot who it was, but he gave an interview to this podcaster, and he openly expressed his love of Bandera, this Melnik guy. He openly expressed how he thought Bandera was a hero and a model for all of Ukraine. And if you don't know who Bandera was, look him up, and I think then you'll get an understanding as to why Russia is engaged in this special military operation, because you have guys like Melnik who worship and idolize Bandera in the very top echelons of Ukraine government, and he got promoted. He got fired as ambassador of Ukraine to Germany, and just yesterday we got the news that he got promoted to Deputy Foreign Minister, the number 2 guy next to Kaluba, the Foreign Minister of Ukraine. So Melnik, this Bandera-loving German, what's the word to call Melnik? German belittler, I guess? I don't know. The word evades me right now, but this guy, instead of being kicked out of the Ukraine government completely, he has gotten a promotion. So they fire him as ambassador, give him some desk job in Ukraine for a couple of months, just until the heat around him cools down, and then Zelensky decides to promote him. And why did they promote him? I'll tell you why I believe he was promoted to Deputy Foreign Minister. He was promoted because he comes from the Bandera wing of the Ukraine government, a wing which has a tremendous amount of power, a far right wing of the Ukraine government. Many people believe the real power of the Ukraine government, that is the part of the government that Melnik comes from. And so they put pressure on Zelensky to promote him. And Zelensky, who is scared to death of this wing of the Ukraine government. Some people say Zelensky's being held hostage by this very far-right Bandera-loving wing of the Ukraine government. Well, he had to promote Melnik, and he did. And now he is Deputy Foreign Minister. Anyway, that is the clown world. To Germany, this is the country that you are deindustrializing for. Congratulations. This is the country, and these are the people that you're willing to deindustrialize for. The Melniks of the world. Anyway, the Duran.locals.com. We are also on Rockfin as well. And go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Check out Alexander's channel and check out the Duran's channel as well. Take care.